Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we are talking with Regina Phelps about uncertain times. Regina, great first and second segment, even though that did seem all dark
A little
cloudy,
much,
gloomy.
right?
Yeah, a little much, but we have a little more to say, but we're going to end up on some good notes at the end. So, what's the next thing we need to focus on?
The next thing I think we need to really focus on is about infrastructure. And I don't know about Canada, but in the United States, we have a really aging infrastructure. I mean, significantly aging infrastructure. And this is really important for us as individuals in resiliency and continuity, because that resiliency of those pieces of infrastructure really impact us. And what I would ask all your listeners to go to is there's a website by the American Society of Civil Engineers. Every 3 years or so, they actually publish a report card on the infrastructure in the United States. And they always give it an overall grade. And they evaluate 17 forms of infrastructure, which include things like bridges, ports, airports, freeways, water delivery systems, the electrical system, etc. So the overall grade of the United States, any idea what you might guess in our 17 kinds of infrastructure?
Well, considering it's the United States, it should be somewhere in the A's.
Yes,
But
should
I've
be.
got a feeling you're not going to give me that back.
Yes, well, yes, it should be in the A's, but it's a C minus.
Hmm.
And actually, many of the items on the list are actually D's, like in David. And part of it is we have really a crumbling infrastructure, whether it's bridges or roads or ports or electrical systems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And primarily that's because to make all that stuff work, it actually takes a lot of money. And that money usually comes from government. Government usually pays for, the electrical grid. They pay for dams. They pay for major roads, et cetera. And really, since about the early 80s, around Ronald Reagan's time, really the funding for most of that infrastructure kind of stopped. And so the United States' infrastructure has really been falling apart. And you may say, well, again, as a continuity professional, why do I care about that? Well, you know what? That has to be roads, how your products are delivered, bridges, the electrical system, things, all of those things we need desperately, not only in our work, but frankly, we need them to live. And so
Your employees, how they are able to get to and from the office or
absolutely,
even work from home.
absolutely. And so I think when people do, one of the processes that we do traditionally in our field is a hazard risk vulnerability analysis, right? We look at a region, we look at an area, and we often will give ourselves pretty good grades for what we think or see. But in reality, I would say to you, if most people actually read the American Society of Civil Engineers infrastructure report, they would think twice about their hazard risk vulnerability assessment, because they would see the poor quality of things like roads, bridges, airports, ports, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Going back to your comment about moving of goods, for example,
Mhm.
or even things like just plain electricity or internet. And so I think you can't really evaluate your risks as an organization if you are not deeply looking into the actual infrastructure in the area that you work and live in, where your employees work and live in, where you get your stuff. And
That's
so I think that's really what you need to look at.
that's an interesting point because we talk about that when it comes to our vendors and our partners. Look beyond just what your relationship is with them, but who are they doing business with? Where are they getting their stuff that eventually makes its way here?
Right.
Here, it's you're not just looking, yes, there is a road, but well, what's the quality of that road? Or yes, there's a
Right.
bridge there so we can get product across. Yeah, but what's the quality of that bridge? What's
Right, right,
is it 80 years old? You
right,
know, or is it relatively new?
right.
And looking at it going beyond just what you see.
Absolutely. And there have been several major bridges that have collapsed in the United States in the last 3 years that have created major issues. And I'm not just talking about Baltimore when that ship hit the bridge in Baltimore. I'm talking about actual major bridges in the East Coast that we created sheer pandemonium. So I think it's important, again, that we understand that infrastructure really needs to be looked at broadly. And when you look at most risk analysis, they don't include that at all. They're making a broad assumption that whatever the infrastructure is, it is more than adequate. And I'm here to say that that's not true. And so I think you need to be smart. And as a resiliency professional, you should be very familiar with your infrastructure. And that's why that report from the American Society of Civil Engineers would be very helpful for people to look at.
Is
And now
that
I talk about
is that
Canada. Are you
because,
guys in good shape?
oh no, we have our issues too.
Do you?
Yeah, I know we've got our issues there, especially in the bigger cities like Toronto,
Mm-hmm.
or Montreal. There are some areas. Montreal many years ago had issues with bridges and things like that, with shoddy materials and business practices and building codes
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. I know they had issues. There is a push to get stronger infrastructure, and I think there was just an announcement a while ago of money being made to improve some of them because
Hmm.
during the pandemic, some of the infrastructure, like uh, um, internet being available in northern communities and small towns, just wasn't sufficient. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
good or it wasn't there.
Right.
So that infrastructure is actually being put in place now, so that I think the directive is every community everywhere in Canada has to be able to have internet access. And
And
I know,
probably broadband, right? Not
yeah,
just, not a dial-up modem, right?
yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of towers going up
Hmm.
all over the place. I know there's
Great.
a lot of work being done on that. But we're also a younger country too, so we don't have as much as you do down there.
Right.
But we have our issues too. It's not all bunnies and rainbows up here.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was very funny. I was originally just thinking that it was mainly the US that had this particular problem. But then I was reading a report that was in the Guardian about the UK, who said that they had, they were like the US. Their grade level was about the same with bridges and roads. And I mean, look how old the UK is, right? As far as a lot of their infrastructure saying exactly that same thing. So again, this goes back to knowing your area. Don't make any assumptions about your infrastructure. And also going back to, again, what we talk about all the time, which is your third party relationships and your key vendors, and what's the road, what are their issues, and really pushing back appropriately to be able to ask those kinds of questions. But I think that's a sort of a baseline issue that we all do. We all do hazard risk assessments, but we make way too many assumptions about the quality
Yes.
of them.
Way too many assumptions. Everywhere I go, it's assumption. It drives me
Right.
crazy. But do you
Right.
think
It does
that
make
maybe
you
that's
crazy.
because in our industry, even when we start, we're taught by so many and have been for so long. I know you're more seasoned than I am, but I've been around for a long time too. And right from the beginning, I was always told, look at what's best for the organization. You're always looking in, but
Hmm.
now it's difficult because we have to take those blinders off and start looking out, not
Absolutely.
just in, but now start looking out. And it's a
Right.
whole change in mindset and way of doing things now.
Right. 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 Yes, our greatest vulnerability may not be us per se. It may be the communities and the areas that we're living in and the quality of that infrastructure that we use and depend on.
Yeah.
And then really tied to that is the issue of cyber related things, which is
Mm,
another anxiety provoking. There's a report. What's today? The 15th. Tomorrow, IMF is coming out with their a big report on the global security, looking at the impact of cyber in particular, but other items on the overall banking system globally. And what they're focusing on, riveted that, is the issue of cyber attacks. And of course, we all intellectually know that. But this is like, again, this actually ties back to the very beginning of what we talked about, which is regional wars, autocratic leaders, blah, 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 blah. What's the best way that you could take down Canada? Excuse me for a moment.
Well,
How about a
one
big
way,
cyber attack?
yeah, cyber attack, turn the temperature up. That's one, climate change, that's doing
Right,
a number on us. But cyber attack, that's one of the easiest ways to get at anybody.
right,
It doesn't matter where you are,
right,
or even how big you are, because a
right.
lot of people tend to think this is only for big companies. No, it's not.
No, not at all. And I think that's really, to me, the last thing that to really talk on before we finish today is that this issue of a cyber attack is such a major concern, and increasingly so. Going back to the things I talked about at the beginning, we have sort of come full circle. What's the best way for an autocratic leader to take down a democratic nation? Launch a big cyber attack. Whether you're attacking their grid or their banking system or something like that, you could actually change that country in seconds.
Mhm.
And look at, like here in the United States, there's been lots of poking very recently in our electrical system, in our water delivery system, in sewer systems across the United States, where there have been intrusions by Russians, intrusions by China, North Korea, Iran. Well, let's just sort of play out if you don't have any electricity or you have no running water for days or weeks or you don't have a sewer system. Just play that out for a while and talk about what your business is doing and what your resiliency is. And so I think the cyber attack issue is something that I know we talk a lot about it, but it is a huge, huge issue. And that's one that could be the one that takes us down if nothing else does.
Yeah, well, it's years ago I heard that the next war won't be fought on the battlefield.
Right,
It'll be felt. It'll be played out on computer screens.
right,
That's how companies will do it. And you don't have to be a big nation to be able to attack United States, or I
right,
don't have to be big to attack China. I could be
right.
a little bit player, but if I can get in there, I can do a lot of damage.
Right, right. And I think that's really an important thing for us to be thinking about.
Yeah.
So in our time we've talked together today, we've talked about a bunch of really kind of horrifying and terrible things. And people might be wondering, like, what the heck can I do about this? And, what does it have to do with me, given my work? And I really want to say that all these things really we need to be aware of them, and we need to be actually practicing and working about how we can be better prepared. And this really goes back to three things that you and I have talked a lot about before, which is, first of all, situational awareness. We can be empowered in how to manage this because we have good situational awareness. So how do we do that? How do you learn more about some of these things? I mentioned, for example, the American Society of Civil Engineers. Looking about that document, looking at how you can learn more about what your vulnerabilities are, and therefore you can plan for them. So the idea of being more aware, opening your eyes up, and beginning to find out what those issues might be are very empowering, because then we can actually do something. Because what we are good at is developing plans and processes to be able to react to these things. So I think having really good situational awareness, probably beyond what you normally think about, is
Yes.
really important.
Yeah, well, like I said, take those blinders off.
Absolutely.
You gotta look externally, not just internally at your own operations.
Absolutely. And as you learn more, that means you also have to educate not only yourself, but people in your area or department, people within your organization, and your executives, so they understand really what the real risks are and that they're not so obvious
Yeah.
often. So
You,
that really is
how did,
tied to that.
how did you word it years ago when we first started talking? Um, covert marketing or something along
Yes, covert marketing.
covert marketing.
Covert
Yeah.
marketing is what you want to be doing. And that means that when you find out some of these interesting things, you share them. You drop them an email saying, boy, I bet you'd be really interested in this, or I know you're interested in this and how this could impact our organization. Always provide information that where you are empowering them and that they can actually do something. And that's super important. And then I think the next thing is that really think about your crisis management processes. We've talked about this a billion times, but when the bad thing happens, do we have a good process to assess something? Do we have the right people that are trained and a team that comes together and that we know how to actually work and actually move forward? And I often find people still to this very day don't have the most basic things figured out. So once you've educated people and you're ready for something, and then the bad thing really happens, then what do you do? How do you come together? How do you assess it? How do you blah, 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 blah? Get people ready so that we can actually do well when that bad thing happens.
Yeah, I've had conversations where, if XYZ happens, what are you going to do? Oh, we'll do all these things, and so-and-so will do that. I'm going, oh, no, 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 no. First of all, how are you getting notified that even happened?
Right.
How are you getting a hold of these people? How are you talking to these people, getting them in a room or on a call or what? I said, before you even start enacting all that stuff that you just told me about, there's a whole pile of things that happened beforehand. What are you doing? And it was a blank face. I don't know.
Yeah, we're trying to avoid the blank face, that blank face in our business, right?
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Regina. It's great to chat with you again. I know we didn't do a show in March, but I'm glad we got to regroup. And this is episode number 45 for us.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
We'll have to do something for my 50th.
Yeah, we'll have to do something.
We'll have a party. We'll have a party.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Regina. Always great to chat with you. And
Alex as well.
And everyone watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.